Whether Trump's bluffing or not is always difficult to tell, but to use economic threats against the country that's been considered to be your closest ally for over 100 years is not the kind of thing we would expect. It's wrong, it's bad, it would be very, very hurtful to us. Now, I think we're in a position where we can negotiate. You know, we're not tied by European Union trade rules. That does give us an advantage in these negotiations. I would just say this, I'm all for Trump taking out enemies of the West, Maduro, the Iranian regime, but if he falls out with his own allies and leaves America isolated, that would be a very bad place to be. So I'm worried about it, I'm concerned about it. I've always been a supporter of the president since way before he got elected first time, but I will be having some words with the American administration in Davos on Wednesday. I think he's wrong. I think what he's done is wrong. I don't think you turn on your allies. By the way, I completely understand strategically why Greenland matters so much.
Now to the drama surrounding Greenland, and Donald Trump says he'll 100% follow through on plans to impose tariffs on America's closest allies if there's no progress on Greenland. He's also declined to say he wouldn't use force to get his own way. The UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer says the US President's approach is completely wrong, something Denmark's Foreign Minister has welcomed.
On Greenland, the right way to approach an issue of this seriousness is through calm discussion between allies. Any decision about the future status of Greenland belongs to the people of Greenland and the Kingdom of Denmark alone.
And we are living in 2026 where you can trade with people, but you can't trade people. Listening to a UK Prime Minister who stands up for that principle is very, very important.
David Blevins now, who has more from Washington.
Things have really escalated at an alarming rate. In the space of just 48 hours, we've gone from the President announcing this decision to impose tariffs of 10%, rising to 25% on European allies, NATO allies, if they stand in his way, to him now refusing to rule out taking Greenland by force. A guarded but telling no comment in answer to that question from our NBC colleagues. And all of this does appear to have been triggered by the fact he didn't win the Nobel Peace Prize last year. The Norwegian Prime Minister releasing overnight details of correspondence he had received from Donald Trump. And in that letter, Donald Trump writes, "Considering your country decided not to give me the Nobel Peace Prize for having stopped 8 wars plus, I no longer feel an obligation to think purely of peace, although it will always be predominant, but can now think about what is good and proper for the United States of America. Denmark cannot protect that land from Russia or China, and why do they have a right of ownership anyway? There are no written documents. It's only that a boat landed there hundreds of years ago, but we had boats landing there also. I have done more for NATO than any other person since its founding, and now NATO should do something for the United States. The world is not secure unless we have complete and total control of Greenland. Now, that letter ignores two things. The fact that the Norwegian government has no influence over who wins the Nobel Peace Prize. It's handled by a completely independent committee, something the Norwegian Prime Minister says he's had to make clear to Donald Trump several times. Or the fact that nominations for last year's Nobel Peace Prize closed on the 31st of January, just 11 days after Donald Trump returned to the White House. So he was never going to be a serious contender anyway. But a short time ago, speaking in Davos, his Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said that it's a joke to suggest all of this is because he hasn't won the Nobel Peace Prize. But it is the President of the United States who keeps raising that issue himself.
Let's switch things over to the US now for more reaction. Joining us is our US analyst, Michael Ware, for his thoughts on this. As I mentioned earlier, Michael, good to see you, by the way. Whenever it comes to Donald Trump, I think one should just sort of look past the initial statement and look to what's behind it all, because that's generally what the US president is getting at. So what do you think is the main aim here for Donald Trump? What's he trying to achieve?
Yeah, well, first I want to say I know Nick Robertson there in Greenland, and yes, he looked like he was freezing. And mate, you've asked a great question, because what's really behind all of this? There is absolutely no question that Greenland is of vital strategic interest to the United States. No one even doubts that. The problem is that the US militarily already has an unfettered and free hand in Greenland. Since a treaty in 1951, they can build as many bases or airfields as they like. So the great question has been, and that deal was reaffirmed in 2004 with the agreement of the Greenland government, the semi-autonomous government. So you've already got it. Why do this? And that's what I think is your question. Because if America takes Greenland, and it could do it economically, or as President Trump says, he refuses to rule out military options. None of us see American troops invading Greenland, but say by one means or another they take it. The logic behind this, amongst the thinkers behind President Trump's foreign policy, is essentially the politics of great powers and dividing the world up into hemispheres. All right, Russia and Europe, you can have that hemisphere. Hopefully a new Europe will arise to properly defend itself against Russia. That's all their problems. America's problems are concentrated on the Western Hemisphere, North and South American continents, and they deem that includes Greenland by necessity. That would leave the Eastern Hemisphere to China or the Indo-Pacific. Now, what the American strategists are saying is that by us doing this and dividing the world up this way, we can refocus on our great enemy. There's a bipolar world. It's America versus China. But what that means is if they do anything of the kind that they're talking about with Greenland, even though the officials and heads of state met here in America and said we agreed to disagree, this would be the death knell of NATO. And the Americans know that. If they touch Greenland, they're basically leaving NATO and leaving NATO to themselves and saying we don't need you, want you, or value you. So the greater purpose behind this, okay, maybe there's some rare earth minerals, very hard to extract, unexplored, and there hasn't been any sort of infrastructure developed to exploit those. So it could be about securing national strategic interests in rare earth minerals to guard against China. But it also means killing NATO. It also means divorcing Europe. So this does fit within a certain radical global strategic policy or thinking that is running rampant right now in the White House and the Trump administration.
So how serious are they about it all?
Absolutely serious. I'm frightened by it. I had no idea. I thought it was just the president, speaking off the top of his head, that it was just sort of putting ideas out there into the ether. But about a month ago, President Trump appointed a special envoy to Greenland, which deeply troubled the Danes, Europe, and the Greenlanders. And I can tell you for a fact that behind the scenes, this administration has been sounding out people to become the nominal governor of the new protectorate of Greenland. I'm frightened and stunned and surprised, even given all the people I know in this administration, that they are so deadly serious about this.
Okay, we'll see where that ends up. Good to see you, Michael. Thank you. We'll chat to you again next week.